Hello, my name is James Trost, and this is A2 Insight. Today's guests are Jermaine Dickerson and Eric Furlong. Welcome to A2 Insight.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, we're very glad to have you here. I'd like to start out, before we get started into why I brought you here, let's learn a little bit more about who you are. So Jermaine, why don't you give us a little bit of information about your background, where you grew up, interests, and so on. So I'll let you start out.
Well, I am an artist and graphic designer, so I'm a creator first and foremost. I've been a creator for the majority of my life, from when I was younger, and drawing superheroes and my favorite characters like Xena the Warrior Princess or anime characters, things like that. And then eventually I went into music, and so I've been an artist essentially all my life as well. And that passion for superheroes that I had initially is what inspired me to do more things. And I've always been the sort of person who has been hypersensitive to issues pertaining to social justice and whatnot. And so I thought, it kind of led me to this point of where I wanted to implement social justice with my passion for creativity and superheroes and things of that sort. And so that really just explains, who I am at my core. Like I said, at my core, I'm an artist, I'm a creator, and I really care about social justice issues and activism.
Good. Well, now, where did you grow up? And give me a little bit of background about your family.
I grew up originally in Detroit, and then I moved to Mount Clemens maybe when I was around 11 or 12 years old with my mom, and my younger brother, and myself. And I went to high school, to Performing and Fine Arts High School called Arts Academy in the Woods. It was a great school, a great experience that sort of helped me refine my voice and find my voice as someone who has occupies different marginalized identities, both being gay, being black, and being part of a low socioeconomic family. So growing up in those intersections has allowed me to have unique experiences, and so I felt that, moving forward, I wanted to do something to definitely impact people in those similar intersections.
Interesting. All right. Well, Eric, why don't you give us more information about your background?
So I was born in Chicago originally. We bounced around a little bit, but then settled down in Ann Arbor when I was fairly young. I've always grown up being a part of the community has always been something that's been very important to me and my family, whether it's volunteering with the Ann Arbor Film Festival, being involved with after-school activities and parent-teacher organizations. We used to be in the Trailblazers program at Pioneer, where we would go to local elementary schools and help students who just needed a little bit of extra help during their coursework throughout the day. And after graduating from high school over at Pioneer, I ended up at Eastern Michigan University, and I lived in Ypsilanti for the better part of 6 years, which is where I started, which is actually where I met Jermaine. We were both around Ypsilanti at the same time, working in different areas, but with the same goals in mind.
All right. Well, that kind of leads us, because we do want to know where this collaboration actually starts. So you go to Eastern. What were you studying at Eastern?
Communications and marketing.
Communications and marketing. And how did you two meet?
Well, I'll talk a little bit about, I started this comic book libraries program as an activity. I had a ton of extra comic books. I knew people who had extra comic books that they didn't want to throw away, but there really isn't a great outlet for a lot of them. A lot of them were just collecting dust on people's bookshelves. So I started working with some teachers at Ypsilanti Community High School to find a place in their classrooms for these comic books.
Okay. Now, before we get to that, all right, so you're a devotee of comic books. You like reading comic books, and you've accumulated quite a few of them, right? Okay, so this is how this kind of begins. Now, what kind of comic books how many comic books did you get? What kind of comic books did you like to read?
Well, personally, I've always been a big Marvel and DC guy. I read a ton of Calvin and Hobbes, Garfield growing up. I read a lot of other really interesting ones as well, like the Bone Saga is a really good children's book that I got into in middle school. There's some good series like Amulet that have come out since then that I've really enjoyed. But so as we were starting to collect these around the area, people would say, hey, you know who you need to get in touch with is Jermaine. Jermaine happens to be doing very similar things to you. And so I heard Jermaine's name about half a dozen times just from people at the local comic book shop, from professors at Eastern, and then eventually we got in touch because right around the same time, he had just started Hero Nation and was doing some real awesome really programs with that.
Great. All right. Well, now we're going to move over to you. And he loves comic books. He wants to read comic books. And most people, I assume, like to save comic books because they might be worth something down the line. But you read them and you want to potentially provide them for others to read, right? That's your motivation?
Exactly.
And Jermaine's name is popping up as you're going about this endeavor. Where does your interest in comic books come about?
I guess I want to clarify too.
Okay.
That, I also went to EMU. I think you said that as well.
Okay, good. All right,
Yeah.
you're right. All right, because that's not where you met, though,
No,
right?
no.
Okay.
Yeah, but
What did you study at Eastern?
So yeah, I was a graphic design major.
Okay,
so
okay.
Going back
All
into
right.
the whole
Sure.
artist and everything like that, and being at EMU, I was exposed to a lot of opportunities to community opportunities to really get in touch with Ypsilanti to see what the city was all about, and then once I moved off campus, that's when I really got in touch with the community and I started to see where different voices were aligned, and different issues or different opportunities for change. And that really is what inspired, the founding of Hero Nation, or part of what inspired the founding of Hero Nation. But I remember with regards to Eric and I and how we met, I think it was over Facebook, and he reached out to me, and he expressed that he had interest in comic books, and he was doing this program. I said it sounded really cool, and so we got together, we met. I think it was at like Sweetwater's or some coffee shop, and then we had our first conversation, and then it went from there.
Okay, great. All right, so we'll take this from that initial collaboration. You originally want to take comic books and somehow get them more well-read, right? Is that really the motivation, or?
Yeah, we figured that, sometimes students have trouble connecting with the books that they're assigned in classes, whether maybe they might be behind in grade level or they're just not interested in the material. So, but graphic novels, whether or not you consider them high education, which we've found that there's a ton of great prose, ton of great characters, stories, and dramas in all of these. Just getting students to read more often is going to increase their reading skills all over. So when we put them in the classrooms and get kids excited about reading, that's good for the teachers, that's good for the students, and that's good for our community in general.
Okay, great. And now you two meet at Sweetwater's, and what is the objective, or what happens after this fateful encounter at the Sweetwater's when you get together? What are you discussing? What is the goal of this after your Facebook encounter?
I think that, remember the conversation just being about what our interests were. So we both, love comics, we both love superheroes, and then asking him about his initiative, what he was doing, and then figuring out the opportunity for where it can align with what it is I was doing at the time. And like I said, earlier, at the time, Hero Nation was just a comic convention. I had no idea that I wanted it to expand beyond that. But as I became more involved in the community, as I saw the needs of the world and people, and just really been putting my ear to the ground to see what opportunities existed, I saw that I wanted it to grow even more. Then meeting him definitely inspired that growth, because I said, well, this can be an organization. This could be, then it said, well, it can be a nonprofit. And so, like I said, meeting him is what partially inspired it to grow into a nonprofit, just to allow for opportunities for other programming and initiatives to come in and to be a part of the Hero Nation umbrella, or the Hero Nation family.
Okay, great. And then Hero Nation, originally you said it was a convention?
Yes.
Now is the name Hero Nation something you came up with? Is that a larger chain? What is Hero Nation, the convention?
Yeah, it was something that I came up with. It was originally Hero Nation Ypsilanti, and that was the name of the Comic-Con, or Comic Convention at the time. But as things began to change, I said, well, eventually, thinking ahead, maybe 5-10 years ahead, I said that I want Hero Nation to grow beyond Ypsilanti. Even though it's founded here, Ypsilanti will be a main component for Hero Nation. I wanted to have an impact elsewhere. What if, for example, we decided to have different chapters in different states, so that Hero Nation will exist in those spaces as well. So it became just Hero Nation after a while.
All right. What is the mission statement of this nonprofit organization you founded, Hero Nation, and what was it like creating a nonprofit? Just the process of filling out the forms and everything else. So it's not just going down and getting a $35 business license. So after this collaboration, you want to start a nonprofit organization called Hero Nation. Did you know what you were getting into?
No, I was not. I know. Clearly not.
Okay, well, let's start, we'll get more into that. But at this point, tell me what is the initial mission of this organization as it relates to beyond the concept of just holding conventions for comic books?
So our mission is to help everyone discover the hero within. Just plain and simple. But we do that through events and programs based in nerd culture that foster empowering and educational experiences for underserved and marginalized communities. So when I say that, or underserved, I mean people of color, LGBTQAI plus individuals, people with disabilities, and women, and people below socioeconomic status.
Right, well, that's a pretty broad vision.
Yes.
And how does that dovetail with, does the comic books encompass that, or is that the main focus?
It definitely encompasses that, because a part of what we do, first of all, I guess I can break it down like this. So our organizational structure is that we have two primary programs. The first one is Gaming Warriors. That is an esports or competitive gaming program where we teach youth how to play video games competitively while also learning important social emotional learning skills like empathy, mindfulness, and initiative, responsibility, all those things. And then the other program is Comic Book Union, and under Comic Book Union is the initiative Comic Book Libraries, which is what Eric has founded.
Now, what is it like when you start this organization, you have a mission statement, you want to serve underserved communities. How did you come up with the idea of how are you going to fund this? So, I think you've actually had creative ways of doing it. It's not like you're just saying, well, I'm going to write a check for $10,000 and start a foundation, is it?
I wish.
How did you go about the concept, or what ideas did you have for funding Hero Nation when you just started getting it all structured?
Do you mean like first Comic-Con or the first?
Well, we'll talk about after the Comic-Con's gone. We've moved beyond by your organizational mission statement, and now how are you going to implement that financially?
Initially we just worked with crowdfunding campaigns. So we relied on donations and crowdfunding. We've been really successful with that. The first Hero Nation Con, which happened back in 2017, our first event, we raised about $6,000. The second event we hosted was our Black Panther event that happened in 2018. So in celebration of the Marvel's Black Panther movie, we had a free event where we collaborated with the Ypsilanti Community High School. We took over 150 students to see the movie for free, in addition to hosting live guest performances by African drum and dance groups, including Al Noor Dance Group. And we also had free food, free comic books, free Black literature, had tons of press available. The kids got free popcorn. They had a free bus ride, a free other comic book related items that were donated to us. And after that, we had our Gaming Warriors campaign, which we raised around $6,000 for that as well. And then we just came off another successful crowdfunding campaign with Comic Book Libraries, where it was a little over $3,000. So we raised our goal about 150% over.
That's great. Actually, when I think about this, I think I was this thing at the Rave Cinemas?
Yeah, so it was.
And it was inundated with like 100 students invading the place. I was there when those buses showed up. I was watching something else, some horrible, forgettable movie. We didn't go to Black Panther, but I remember this crowd there. It must have been the same time.
Probably,
Okay, well, good. Well, they didn't invade the movie. Some forgettable movie, I forgot. But let's go back to comic books. Why comic books? Why not buy, get them Hardy Boys series, or, get them, Harry Potter books. Why do you think comic books is an important way of getting kids encouraged and motivated to read?
Well, to start, frankly, Spider-Man and Batman are more interesting than the Hardy Boys.
I didn't know they even knew that word anymore. I'm glad you're there still. You know what they are at least.
Oh my gosh, I made the mistake of dropping off one of these libraries during the middle of class instead of in between like a lunch recess or anything like that. It was a mistake because those kids lost their minds. They came up and they were grabbing the books, like, can we read them now? Can we read them now? And I think that's really the whole point of it is we want kids to read more often. We want them to increase their vocabulary. I mean, sure, a lot of it's science fiction that we find in these graphic novels and comic books, but they're still using scientific terms that kids will go research and learn what they mean. There's a lot of really great morals and really great stories. These characters are just like us. You know, Spider-Man goes and saves the day, but he's also late for work, and he lets down his family sometimes because he's just too busy saving the day. These are all things that we can relate on different levels, and I think that's what really resonates with a lot of the students. There's also been some really great stories of students just getting more interested in reading broader senses because of the comic book libraries. There was a student or a teacher I had talked to who talked about one of his students had read the entire Black Panther run that this amazing author, Ta-Nehisi Coates, had written. Before joining Marvel and writing Black Panther, Ta-Nehisi Coates was an award-winning nonfiction writer. And that student was so motivated and so influenced by that Black Panther series that he went out and bought a copy of his nonfiction piece, Between the World and Me. There's also been examples of students liking like the horror books, the horror graphic novels. There's a couple retelling of Stephen King stories in graphic novel form, and them liking those so much that they go off and read the actual novels. And so that's really what it's all about, is just kind of drawing kids in, getting their attention, and at the same time, there's really great stuff in between these pages.
And then to add to that, representation is also important. You know, many authors and people have talked about the idea or the notion that comic books, or even just art in general, anything creative, but in this case comic books, have been platforms or vessels in which youth or people in general could identify with certain characters, different stories. Say, for example, there is a transgender superhero or a Black transgender superhero who's a trans woman in a book. And previously there were none that existed in the world. So imagine a young trans girl, a Black trans girl, reading this story and then seeing themselves represented in a really empowering and unique way. That's extremely important for the development and for cognitive development and the overall teaching youth how to express themselves and teaching emotional intelligence. Like Eric said, you know, these characters have relatability in different aspects. They're, you know, the reason why the superhero genre is so prominent today, outside of the successful movies and whatnot, is because they represent different parts of the human experience. They tell us a lot about our fears, our hopes, our dreams, our aspirations, what inspires us, what moves us, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, the youth connected them so much and why they're so popular. So we definitely want to make sure that youth and everyone has the opportunity to be empowered by that through comic books, through literature, while also doing our part to combat youth illiteracy, because, you know, studies show that youth illiteracy or youth, you know, literary rates are extremely low, and so we want to make sure that, you know, we address those disparities directly, but maybe in a more unconventional way.
Well, I think that's what I find interesting about this. I mean, I certainly, if you don't read, you don't learn. If you don't learn how to read, you're certainly not going to go very well, or you're even lack of interest. And that kind of leads, and comic books, this is kind of an innovative, I mean, that's the reason this is interesting. It's an innovative approach. The goal is to get students to read more. And then I guess the question then becomes, how do you gauge the success of this? It might be I mean, we can provide students with reading about superheroes, about transgender, and seeing themselves within the comic books, but ultimately the goal would be to get their piqued interest, as you're saying, to move into more traditional reading, because that's really where a lot of things are. How do you, by getting the kids motivated, is there any way that you can see practical results of people's investments in your organization? I mean, someone's going to say, what does Hero Nation say? We did this, we gave this many comic books, but is there any other external gauge you have to show that there have been some improvement based on these efforts?
I think a part of that is through programming. And so, for example, in the past, we've had programming where I taught students how to draw digitally, using digital tablets, how to draw their own superheroes, and then I have them do surveys after each class. Same thing with our video game program. Students do pre and post surveys before each class, and we sit down and we have a debriefing about the class to really discuss how they were impacted by that experience. And of course, since we're a fairly new organization and a lot of this stuff has not been done before, or it has, but we want to do it in different ways, or we want to tweak what's been done, because nothing is really new under the sun, but we definitely want to make sure that we get the results that we're looking for, and that people can see that everything that we're doing does have an impact. But we are learning as we go as well. But I think a lot of the success has been gauged through programming, through surveys. Like with the Black Panther event, we send out surveys to the youth to ask them about their experience, what did they learn from the experience, if they learned, if they felt that they were empowered by the movie or the overall experience of the Black Panther event. And then, like I said, we were always open to looking for new and more conventional ways of finding how the success of these programs that we're running are working with the youth.
Now, going back to comic books, and you have read a lot of comic books. I assume you had a large collection. From my experience, and I've done many years since, but I used to get these, I wasn't really into the Tales from the Crypt and some of these other horrible things. Whatever, to each his own, I suppose. But do you solicit donations of comic books? I mean, most of the people I know who are really into comic books, they ain't giving you nothing. They're holding on to their Superman #1 from 1963, and they've got it in, I'm just wondering, the actual, there are thousands, people have thousands of comic books, Mad magazines lying around in their basements. Do you solicit to get, how do you donate? Where do you get the stuff to donate, I guess is the question.
Definitely. So more than half of our books that we currently have in our libraries come straight from donations. And just to, give you a quick debrief, there's definitely like the ones you're talking about, like Superman #1. I don't know anyone who would part with that besides, giving up an arm and a leg for it. But there's also, if you go to Barnes and Nobles, there is rows and rows of graphic novels and comic books. And anyone that you buy from there is not going to increase in value over time. It's going to depreciate in value. And so if you buy it from Barnes and Noble for $15 in 2008, 2019, after wear and tear, it's nowhere near that amount. But that's the thing, is that people have these in their bookshelves. They keep buying new ones, or, they haven't picked them up in a couple years, and they don't want to throw them away, but they want to see them go to a good use. So we open up a channel of communication. We've been looking.
How do you connect to this shelf of comics that somebody in Ypsilanti or in Ann Arbor just might have? I mean, where do these comics come? Where they come from?
Sure. Well, I mean, we're very involved in the comic book community and the people around there. We talk to the people who own these shops. Fun for All Comics and Games down in Ypsilanti has been great. The Vault of Midnight over in Ann Arbor is awesome. They put words out to their friends, or, we just strike up conversations with people at the comic book shops. But also, Jermaine is, pardon me, I almost used a curse word, but one heck of a social media marketer, and he's done an amazing job of putting out the word to, hundreds and at this point thousands of followers who have said, hey, I got a couple extra comic books, why don't I send them your way?
Interesting.
I was going to say that Twitter has been, or social media in general has been extremely advantageous for us, because without it, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Sure.
So, like you said, just a lot of the comic books that we've received have come from donations. And when I ask for donations on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, they come flying in from prominent writers and artists, from people who just love comics in general, want to see their comics go to a good cause.
Are these sent to like a main distribution center? They come to your house? I mean, where do the books go?
To our house or to wherever we are at the comic book show, and then we organize them.
Okay.
And,
Because that's the process in itself,
Yes.
isn't it?
It's a lot of clerical work that I wasn't accustomed to before I started running this program. But I mean, I've literally had coworkers come drop them off a bag of them at my desk at work. We also work with the Ypsilanti District Library down on Michigan Ave, where people can ship them into if they're out of state or a little farther. Mm-hmm.
Now, this is another question as it relates to comic books. Some people may not know, and you might know, that something they give you might be more or better spent being held onto as opposed to being distributed. Have you run across, not necessarily Superman #1, but maybe some comic books that are really valuable? Has this been an issue yet?
It hasn't been an issue yet, and honestly, if we did receive one that was of value, I'd probably let the person know.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like I said, most of these books are hand-me-downs that people have purchased from Barnes & Noble or their local comic book shop. I mean, the ones that are actually worth a lot of money are pretty far and few in between.
That's true.
Yeah. And just goes to show you that we're a grassroots organization, so a lot of the stuff we're doing is very small. Our operations are very small, especially with this, it's just us two. And so we're doing the best we can to manage everything. And people always ask me, or when they connect with me through email or about Hero Nation, how many people on your team do you have? It seems like you're so big. I said, no, honestly, it's just a couple people doing this
Well,
work.
just so you know, you want to project that there are a lot of people working for it.
Yes.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
It makes it, you want it to always to appear to be a larger organization than you are.
Yeah.
That's something to remember. All right, well, so now we've got this. This has been around for 2 years, is that right? Or how long?
Since 2017, so almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years, all right. We had the initial mission of collaboration with the libraries, hopefully getting projects to get kids to go to see movies and they get interested in reading, which comes about by reading comic books. Where do you see the organization evolving then? Where do you want to take it, I guess, at that? I mean, you have a rather broad, what's your mission statement? It's a rather broad mission statement. You envision that you want to just stick with the comic book vision, or you want it to grow into some other aspects? Where would you like to take your organization in 5 years?
So, like I said, nerd culture is a very broad.
Could you define nerd culture for our audience? This is Ann Arbor. They don't, actually they would be quite aware of that, our university community folks. But what is nerd culture?
So when I say nerd culture, I mean specifically video games, comic books, graphic novels, manga. So those are the two, or those mediums are what we're focusing on right now. So video games and literature, comic literature. So with the video game program, what we hope to do is to eventually create leagues or video game leagues in different, or video game teams in different schools in the Ypsilanti area, so that we could, the students can, in those leagues, and they'll be taught by different instructors, different facilitators, so the students can eventually compete against each other. So say, for example, one school has their own league or video game team, the other one has their own video game team. They'll compete for things like scholarships or anything related to education. And with the comic book libraries program, Eric, he has ideas about how to expand on that too. He wants to.
Before we get to this, so you actually envision, maybe even a varsity letter jacket at Ypsilanti High School with, the call to duty for, you blew, I mean, I like it. It's an evolution away from the traditional forms of school competition.
Yes, and when you see, just like you said, it's like traditional sports, but with video games, that's what esports are. And when you notice, yes, exactly. Okay. And when you notice who you're working with, the youth you're working with, a lot of the youth, or some of the youth, they have trauma going on at home or in the neighborhoods and the communities, and so they could really benefit from something that can help them escape, using whether it be video games or comic books. And so if it means joining a video game team where they learn how to be responsible and take initiative and being leaders in their video game class, or reading the comic book where they learn how to be a superhero, either way they're being empowered in some way. And so eventually, like I said earlier, we wanted to expand in different areas, in Michigan first, but then the broader goal is to have different chapters
all over the world.
All over the world, or maybe starting with the U.S. first. But we want to solidify, because we're not in any
Sure.
rush
Good.
whatsoever.
Okay.
We want to solidify our programming, our mission, make sure that, that's working. We want to make sure that what we're doing is working, that it has the impact that we're looking for. If it's not, then we go back to the drawing board. Like, for example, we just got our first board members, and I'm really excited to meet them in a couple of weeks. And so they're going to help us. They're going to hold me accountable to make sure that we're getting those results that we need, to make sure that we are not overspending, or I have a tendency to where whenever I get excited, I spend my own money on different things, and so I have to be really careful with that. Otherwise, I'll go broke trying to help them save the world.
Sure, that's right.
So my family had to, hold me down and say, Jermaine, I know you want to help people, but the bills have to come first. And then even with Hero Nation Con, someone asked me about, that, and said, will there be other conventions like that in other states when you plan to expand? I said, no. Hero Nation Con will always be in Ypsilanti. That's going to be here, and that's going to be here to stay. That's going to be our really big event. So ultimately, I want us to take our time building this out, because I know we're building something special, something unique, and at the same time, we want to be extremely mindful of the people that we're working with. Because even though it is a fairly broad mission, I think it's really specific where we want to make sure that we're empowering people through comic books and through video games. How to do that? It's a challenge, because some will be facing a lot of adversity with regards to the education system, and maybe administrators who don't see the value in comic books or video games, and see them as just child's play. So we'll be combating that, but with our faith in our mission and the belief that it works, and that we're testaments to how nerd culture can be empowering, can be useful. I believe that we'll get the job done.
Good. All right. And then the comic book vision in 5 years, or is that this component? Do you see any?
I mean, I have family members working in the Detroit public schools. I think ideally I would like to, solidify this program here in Ypsilanti, and then see about maybe expanding it out there. And I think, as soon as we have our 501c3 status, it's going to be a lot easier to get more organizations on board. We've already been able to show them the benefits of these programs just from feedback from our teachers, feedback from our students, and I think it's something that people could really value from all around our state.
All right. Well, now in addition, I just wanted, so you've got your BA in communications and
My BS in communication and marketing.
and did you finish your graphic arts degree?
Yes, graphic.
All right. Well, and this is certainly a project that you're working on, but do you have other lives in terms of positions? What do you do that is actually revenue producing instead of revenue requesting?
I have a full-time job right now, in addition to doing the nonprofit work and also doing freelance work on the side. So the only time I really have to work on this stuff is when I leave work or on the weekends. And so I'm always hustling, I'm always busy. So yeah, that's really what my life is.
I also have a full-time job at a tech company here in Ann Arbor, and I am dropping off these libraries on my lunch break and then running back to work on time. So we like to keep busy. We're working after work on these projects as well. We get together and do conventions on the weekends and also collaborate on our projects. So, it's like a 50, 60 hours a week, but we love it, and we're just two nerds who got a mission to empower students in our community, so we're all about it.
All right. Well, here's to Nerd Nation. Jermaine and Erica, I want to thank you very much for being on A2 Insight today. I'd like to let you know also that we will be leaving the website address for Hero Nation Ypsi at the end of the show, and the ways that our folks can get in touch if they want to learn more, or if they'd actually like to donate some comic books or anything else. So again, thank you very much for being on our program today. And for A2 Insight, until next time, I'm James Strauss.